Live.
Okay, we're live on June 14th,
16th?
15.
15th, I was right, and 2023, and I want to thank you, Mom, for being willing to have your observations and comments recorded for future people to listen to.
Okay,
Does it
you're
bother-
welcome.
Does it bother you? Does it make you nervous?
Well,
Having it recorded.
of course, I'm doing this is to be gracious.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, really. Thank you so much for that. Well,
These can be edited, of course.
Yeah.
yes, but not by you. Because you'll delete it. And if it was me, so would I. But anyway, so one thing that I'm always curious about, and I want to hear from you, is what is your earliest memory? The first thing you can remember after, of course, being born.
Well, that is a really challenging question for me, Tim, because I find it very difficult to actually remember what it was like when I was a child. I have very in and out, vague memories of not so much when I was like 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
I have been told various things. For instance, the story is that when my brother was born, he was born in February and I turned 1 in March, and I was staying with my grandmother, Fouché, and when my mother and father came to pick me up with my brother,
Mhm.
it was the first time I had walked.
Oh, it just happened to be the first time, but you don't remember that
I
yourself.
don't remember it. That's a story that I have been told.
Okay, but that's different from remembering.
I know.
So somewhere along the line, like if it was 4th or 5th or 6th year or somewhere along, it must be something was like the first thing that you actually remember.
Hmm?
You remember going to grade school? First day kindergarten.
You mean, do I actually have it in my mind?
Yeah, you remember
What
can you
I
picture?
wore? And
Well, not necessarily, just the memory of it. I mean, because I can remember the first day of kindergarten. They asked me what if I could count to 10 and to tie my shoelaces, and it was in the cellar of the Baptist church. I remember those things.
Well, I don't.
Okay.
For some reason, I have very poor memories of that. I can't. Maybe I'm expecting too much of my memories. Maybe I'm expecting that they'll come back whole to me.
Mhm.
I can remember, for instance, my brother and I growing up in the house in back of the library where we lived until we moved to Canandaigua Street. And that house had a big back porch. And on that back porch there was an extra refrigerator from the kitchen that my mother kept extra food in. And my brother and I I can remember this very, very clear because my father was extremely angry. My brother and I got to horsing around. And
No.
well, we did a
Kids never
lot.
do.
I mean, my brother is only a year younger than I am,
Uh-huh.
and if we weren't horsing around and thinking about mischief together, we were getting into arguments. And my brother is very fond of saying that I teased him all of the time. He alleges that. I'm not quite so sure of all of that.
I remember hearing that he had curly hair, long
Oh,
curly hair. maybe not long, but he told me.
He had
sometimes.
curly hair, yes, he did. He was very good looking. Anyway, we were horsing around on the back porch, and somehow, I don't quite remember how, we were pushing each other. You know how kids push each
Yeah,
other?
horsing around.
Wow. I pushed my brother right into the refrigerator and it fell over.
Uh-oh.
And all of that food went all over the porch. And we really came into bad news for that. But that's a memory I have. Another time my brother and I got into another disagreement, and he threw a gun at me.
Oh, a gun.
It wasn't a real gun. It was, kids had guns then. Guns did not, there weren't so much,
Like a BB gun, you mean?
no, it was like
A
well,
cap gun.
yeah, cap gun.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
what it was. And we were having an argument, and I was sitting on the couch, and he got mad at me, and he threw the gun at me, and it made a big hole above the couch. And we did not own that house. It was a rental. I assume my father fixed it, but that's all I remember that. And the house had a long dining room, and off the dining room was sort of kind of like a back room, kind of like a yucky looking pantry back room, and that's where I had a bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
because there was only my mother and father upstairs and my brother upstairs, and then the bathroom in between. The bathroom upstairs was really big, and so I slept in that bathroom, and I was really scared a lot of the time in that bathroom. I was sure there were rats out there. I didn't exactly think they were like rats, but I thought they were like, bad things.
Did someone tell you that, or you just?
No, I thought that. It was just, it smelled. To me, it smelled. And I was probably 10,
Uh-huh.
and and when I had my tonsils out, that's where Dr. Bramer came and took them out.
Boy, house visit.
No, I didn't go to the hospital. I had my tonsils out in the house.
Uh-huh.
He did at that point.
So you remember your father, and he had a temper that you remember, or when you were,
Well,
when it was appropriate at least.
yes, when it was appropriate. I never in my life growing up was spanked.
Oh.
And I don't really recall if my brother was ever spanked. I don't think so. But
We were spanked, but we probably deserved it. I remember Dad saying to me, "This is gonna hurt me more than it hurts you."
what were you spanked for?
Well, I don't remember, but I'm sure that it was something bad, and I probably deserved it. But what about your mom? So tell me about your memories of your mom in the way back early parts of your childhood.
What do you want to know about her?
Anything that you want to tell me. I mean, so let me put it this way. What is there that if you could hear from your mom or anyone who's now passed away, what would you like to ask them? This is a simple question. What would you like to ask them that we can no longer find out because they're no longer here to ask? Don't worry about sitting and thinking about it because we can edit out any long pauses.
Well, truth to be told, I always wondered and still wonder why my mother and father got married, why they chose each other, because they were really not compatible. My mother was a very, she liked things just so.
She did. I remember that about
She
her.
liked to have her surroundings in good in good order.
Mhm.
She liked having nice furniture, and she did a lot of searching for just the right curtains, or just the right towels, or just the right dishes. She loved to have good dishes. She had a lot of good dishes. And my father was more, he liked to bowl, he liked beer, he liked to smoke.
Right.
Although my mother smoked, but not the same way that my father did. And he was a little bit more not so concerned with his surroundings as my mother was.
Yeah, I remember that of course when we were kids and we went to her place where everything was in its place, everything had a place and it was in place.
Right.
That if we, like she had the scale where they had with the little weights and all, and if we got them out of line, she wasn't really happy with that.
Right.
But she had nice things. She had a painting, oil painting hung on the wall, and it was a nice painting. That she had a light that shone up against it. She just liked nice things.
She did. She liked nice things, and I think I would like to talk to her more about that and what inspired her to want to have everything just so. And there are questions I would have, like, where did all these nice things come from? I know my father did not really make a lot of money, and my mother did not work. It wasn't until later in her life that she went to work. She never worked when I was growing up. And so by the time my mother got dementia and time passed, I didn't have a chance to really ask her some of the things, and some of the things that they're personal things that I would have asked her. Questions that
when you're a kid, you don't think to ask.
right, and even when you're grown up,
Right.
and you have your own family that you're busy at, and you forget that you wanted to know these things, and until later, then you realize that everybody is gone that could answer those questions. There's no one left of my family except Jim and my sister.
And they probably don't have any insight into what it was that brought your mother and father
My
together.
sister and I have talked about it,
Uh-huh.
and we really have been left in a quandary. We know that there was big differences, and
Of course, opposites do attract, and given
Yes.
the right situation and social dynamics and
well, my
youthful-
father was big. It was a big footballer,
Mhm.
and I think that he might have really wanted a life in the sports field
Yeah.
rather than going to work at Garlock's, which is what he did.
Would you say he was disappointed overall in this life?
I think he was, yes. I think he went through several, my father went through several phases of his life where he did different things. operated a bowling alley. He ran a restaurant. You know,
He probably had a niche, but he never found it.
exactly, honey. He never could find the niche where he was really happy, and I think that's how his drinking problem came about. Is that he was not a happy man, and so then he started drinking, and
You think he drank to excess?
well, I know it. He did. Yes, he did, and.
He used to come over and don't tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I had the feeling that you were nervous when your dad came over.
Yes. This was after he was separated from my mother.
Yes, long after, right. He
Yes.
would come to visit us in
Well,
29 Kendall.
because he was, for one thing, at that time, I drank whiskey, and I had a bottle of whiskey in the cabinet in the butler's pantry, and when he came over, he used to just drink out of that.
Oh.
And he would be driving. He drove a great big enormous car, as you know, and that made me very nervous. And he was convinced that all he had to do was to convince me to ask my mother to take him back. That if he could convince me to do that, my mother would listen to me and she would take him back. And I was not about to do that. It made me very nervous
Sure.
to have him come and implore me. He used to implore me to talk to Mom. He was unhappy about everything that went wrong with that situation. But he had, like I said, he was drinking, and that's another thing I would have to ask my mother, because I didn't have the full story of the things that went wrong. My sister did. She was still living at home, and she used to hear them fight. And I had left home by that time. So I really didn't, it was a big surprise to me that they weren't getting along, because I wasn't living there. My sister also, has said that there are several things that she wished she understood better.
Well, they may have started drifting apart when you were grown up and she was out of the house and had a job and in the wider world, and she something she was successful at.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah. She gradually became more independent of my father.
Yeah.
So,
I got the impression that she was a very capable person.
yeah. Well, after she and my father separated, she had to learn to drive, because she didn't know how to drive. He used to take her back and forth to work. And so before she learned how to drive, she went out and bought a car. So she had a car ready, and actually she and I got our driver's license at about the same time. She had problems learning how to drive. She went to the driving school, and I think she went through 2 courses before she did learn how to drive. So, and then she had her car all ready for her. And I can remember when my Aunt Kathleen was learning how to drive, she used to get me out of school and take me with her while she practiced. That's when we lived in the house on Kyler Street. And no, I think it was later than that, because after we moved out of that house on Kyler Street, Kathleen and Donnie and Kathy and Fred moved in. Danny wasn't born yet then. can't remember how old I was when Danny was born, but I used to babysit him, so I must have been later. But Kathleen could get me out of school, and I used to. Well, she was going to see a psychiatrist. I think it was on Monroe Avenue, and she used to get me. She didn't want to go alone, so she would get me out of school to go along with her, and I would go with her. She would drive into the city, and she would see the psychiatrist, and we would go out for lunch.
What a big trip, so that's
Yeah,
much
it was
better
a-
than being in
Yeah,
school.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Well, about surprises, along the lines of surprises, I am curious what you think most people would be surprised to learn about you. Can you think of something that people don't know about you and they would be surprised to find out?
Oh. Oh, Tim. Oh.
That you would be willing to talk about?
Right. You see, there you go. I mean,
Well, your multiple careers, for one thing.
well,
Just to list the number of things that you have done personally and professionally.
they would be surprised to know that.
Yeah, probably.
So you've always been an avid reader, as I recall. And,
Oh, yeah.
And like I used to go up to the bookstore to get New Yorker for you. So and bookshelves at 29 Kendall packed with books, but that kind of implies that you have a focus. You want to learn things about the outside world, and you have probably a perspective on them, and you have some thoughts about the outside world. And so I'd be interested to hear what you may have picked up through reading fiction and through all the reading that you've done through the years, and what you think about the stories that you read, what interests you, and maybe if you can have any thoughts about why.
Well, you ran a bookstore at one point,
Yes, I did.
more than one point.
Yes, I was when I started working outside the house, one of the things I did was run a Walden bookstore. I've always done some kind of work outside the house, even when I was just doing it part-time. When I was growing up, I babysat, and I worked at Garlock's, and I worked at the meat market, and then when we...
You worked at the meat market in Clifton?
No, in Palmyra.
Oh, okay.
At the,
Tell them about the slimy hot dogs.
Oh, gee, this has stuck with me for years. I couldn't have been more than, I don't know how old you had to be to work that long ago, but I was young. I was going to school. We always had summer jobs, and I worked behind the meat counter, and at that time, hot dogs came in bulk. I mean, you had a big
Boxes.
no, they were in kind of a stainless steel tub underneath, you know how meat markets are, well, how they used to be. They had the window and all the stuff was there and you could see it, and the guy stood in back and you'd say, well, I would like one steak, or give me a pound of hamburger, and you did that right in front of them. It wasn't all packaged up. So the customer would say, I would like 2 red hots and 2 white hots, and you would wrap them in paper and, you know, weigh them and mark on them how much it was and all of that. So every once in a while we had to take the hot dogs out of the tubs and take them. We took the whole tub and took the tub out into the back room, and we had to wash them.
Wash the hot dogs?
Yeah, because they would get all slimy.
And put them back in the tub.
and put them back underneath in the meat counter so people could come in and buy them. Ah. And when I worked at Garlock's, I worked in the valve section, which was very dirty and gritty. I'm sure don't have very good memories of that, but I did work one summer doing that. And let's see.
Well, you went to nanny school. Tell them about that.
Well, that was after I was been in the retail business for I think I was about 50 then, and I was getting pretty tired of the retail business, and I saw a circular in the mall for a nanny school that was starting up, so I quit the retail job and went to nanny school. It was the one and only year of nanny school. It was supposed to be a big deal. They were gonna have a school and do this like all the time, but this was one class and we all graduated nanny school. I don't know what happened to anybody else, but that's when I became a nanny and went to work for Rebecca in Geneva. And then after I was done being a nanny for quite a while, then I worked at Happiness House.
It's a lot of different careers.
But I can remember reading a lot, Tim. I could stand at the kitchen stove and make dinner and read at the same time. I could carry a child around on one hip and read a book at the same time.
So what I was getting at was, so you've read a lot and a lot of stories from a lot of different perspectives, and what perspective do you think that you have now after being, because it adds to your understanding of the world, at least I think it does, to read a lot of different stories, it would be well read. And so what do you think after all these years of reading? I mean, what, like for instance, is this a good world? Are people good? Mostly good? Are they mostly bad? What is the role of good and evil in this world? What are humans like? Do they mostly, that's just one issue. Are they mostly take care of each other and have a positive future, or is really, are we headed in a path where humans are going to destroy themselves because their innate tendencies are just to self-destruction?
Is that something you're worried about?
I think that some people feel one way and some people feel the other way, and I wonder how you feel.
Can't you feel that way sometimes and the other way sometimes?
Yes, absolutely. It is not a static thing.
Yeah.
I think that people tend to have an overall perspective. Like I personally feel that people are basically good, and they're more good than evil. And if you let them and you open the way for them, they will mostly do things that are good for other people as well. But not everyone agrees with me on that.
Well, you're still a voracious reader.
Oh, God, yeah. I just finished a book up before you came. And now I got another book in at the library, by the way, Wells. That's the kind of question that I'm not prepared to delve into, Tim, because
Okay,
what you really want to know is my overall view of civilization, of life, of people,
Yes.
from the perspective of having lived for 88 years.
Yes.
And
Bingo. That's what I'm asking.
yes, I understand what you're asking me, and I understand too that I read the New York Times and lots of magazines besides the books that I read, mostly the books that I read are fiction. I like a right at this point in time. I tend to read anything that's humorous because everybody needs a little humor in their life,
Absolutely.
and you don't get that reading the New York Times. But basically, the point of view that you're asking me to talk about is really, where are we headed? Is there enough good in all of the people that are in our world today? Is there enough good to save democracy, to save the world as we know it, to keep enough of the natural world that we need to survive, our forests, our seas, to provide comfort and care for the children that we are bringing into this world? And I think that's what you're asking me, and I'm not prepared to answer that right now,
Okay,
but I
that's fair.
understand the question.
Okay, we'll move on then. Another question I would like to know.
Okay, this is it. This is
Okay,
your
last
que-
question.
Yeah.
What surprises you the most about getting older?
Oh, Tim, I'm so surprised about the whole gradual decline of all of the things that you have been able to do with speed and without even thinking about them. Now you have to think about them all the time because you have less of ability to do them. I never really thought about that until I lost all of the small things that you don't think about, that come naturally to you when you're in your 40s and 50s, even 60s. And then as you approach the really older age, you find that all of those things that you took for granted are much more difficult to accomplish. And that really surprised me.
Anything in particular of those things that you're struggling with?
Well, Cynthia and I were just saying about cooking. I used to love to cook, and to me now it's a big surprise how much I really hate it. I mean, and I like Cynthia was saying, you know, when she's in the groove and she can get in the kitchen and really smooth cook. I used to be able to do that. I used to drive home from work and ideas would pop into my mind of what I might want to make for supper. Now I'm lucky if the Wordle answer will pop into my mind. And so
You only get 6 tries.
today I got it in 2. So that's another thing I do, you know, every day. The Wordle, the crossword puzzle, and my bridge game I do every morning. But it surprises me how much I really love to cook and take such enthusiasm in doing them. When I used to make great big dinners for Thanksgiving, I see myself getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to put the turkey in the oven and making the mashed potatoes, and making potato salad to go on a picnic. It just all seemed to flow.
That's right.
And now I can hardly think about doing it. That to me is a big surprise.
You made some wonderful meals.
I did, and I love to do it. So it's a big surprise to me that I now hate it.
Well, it's a burden.
It's a burden.
Yeah.
My hands don't work the way they used to.
Right.
It's hard to get the cans open. They don't make them for older people. And you gotta chop things and, well, that's it, honey.
Okay.
Good job.